Have you ever been the new kid in school, the one everyone whispers about? Now, imagine that school is the entire galaxy, and you're the only human in a room the size of a small moon. This was the Galactic Council Chamber, a swirling abyss of twilight where 73 alien species floated in pods, arranged by who mattered most. 1,000 different languages, clicks, hisses, and hums, all melted into one by translation magic. And right at the bottom, in the center of it all, stood Ambassador Sarah Chen. In her plain gray suit, she looked like a single speck of dust. From their high and mighty pods, the council members weren't even trying to hide their smirks. The universal translator kept spitting out the word laughter as clusters of weird alien eyes stared her down. She had just finished reading Earth's formal request, and to these ancient cosmic beings, it was the best joke they'd heard in a century. "Hold on, let me see if I've got this," chirped the speaker, a bird-like creature named Tom Von, his three-part beak clicking. "Your species, who just figured out faster-than-light travel 80 years ago, wants to claim a 50-light-year-wide no-fly zone around your tiny star system?" "That is the substance of our declaration, yes," Chen replied. Her voice was as calm and steady as a frozen lake, with zero trace of the fear anyone else would be feeling. "And you genuinely believe," Tom Von squawked, dripping with sarcasm, "that every race in this chamber is going to honor this keep out sign of yours?" "We expect all interstellar travelers to respect the boundary," Chen stated, her composure unshaken. That one sentence sent the chamber into an uproar. The translators struggled to keep up with the cacophony of hoots, bellows, and outright roars of disbelief. Some of the more aggressive species looked genuinely insulted. But Ambassador Chen simply waited, perfectly still. She never broke eye contact with the speaker's pod, her hands clasped calmly behind her back. She just let the tidal wave of mockery wash over her. After a moment, Tom Von flapped a wing for silence. The noise faded, but the air was still thick with ridicule. "Ambassador," he said, "your people have a grand total of 12 colonies. 12. The Zatharan Empire next to me governs 47 entire star systems. The Marine Collective has settled 300 worlds. The youngest species here besides you has been star-hopping for 600 years. By what right do you make such an outrageous demand?" "It isn't a demand," Chen corrected him gently. "It is an announcement." "A pointless distinction," a new voice boomed, deep and rumbling with raw power. "So are you announcing this to us, or are you threatening us, little human?" Every head in the chamber turned toward the Zithran pod. High Commander Velkoth loomed into view on its screen, his colossal four-armed body covered in natural armor plating. The Zatharans had built their empire by crushing civilizations, not negotiating with them. "We are threatening no one," Chen said, turning to face the new challenge. "We are establishing a border, and we are asking, politely, for it to be respected." "Ask?" Velkoth's huge mandibles parted in a terrifying version of a smile. "You are in no position to ask for anything. You stand before the most powerful beings in existence and declare a massive section of space off limits. And we're all supposed to just... what? Tip our hats and obey?" "Yes," Chen said, the single word cutting through the air. The High Commander let out a laugh that sounded like an avalanche. "And if we say no, will your 12 little planets declare war on the known universe?" "We truly hope it doesn't come to that," she replied. "Hope." Velkoth seemed to swell, filling the screen with his intimidating presence. "Let me tell you what I think of your hope, human. The Zatharan Empire has ground species with technology you can't even comprehend into cosmic dust. We have dismantled fleets 10 times your size, and you have the nerve to tell us where we can and cannot go?" Chen's calm expression didn't waver for a second. "Commander Velkoth, I must strongly advise you." "You will advise nothing!" His roar physically vibrated through the chamber floor. "The primary trade route between our core worlds and the outer rim passes directly through your little exclusion zone. We've been using that route for 3,000 years. Do you honestly believe we will divert our fleets because a baby species that still uses chemical rockets asks nicely?" "The route can be altered slightly," Chen suggested. It would add no more than 6 days to your journey. A minor delay when you consider the alternative. The alternative to what? Velkoth sneered. The alternative to the insult of the mighty Zitharan Empire being forced to detour around your insignificant little home? He spread his massive arms. No, Ambassador, we will not be adjusting our course. In fact, I believe it's time someone taught humanity its place in the galaxy. A dead silence fell over the chamber. Even the delegates who had been chuckling moments before were now watching with rapt attention. This was no longer a debate. When a Zitharan High Commander spoke of teaching lessons, it meant warships were already being fueled. Commander, Tom Von the speaker began, perhaps this discussion can be handled with more... The discussion is over, Velkoth snapped. In 3 of your Earth months, the Zitharan Trade Armada will travel its ancestral route directly through this so-called human space. If the humans object, they are welcome to try and stop us. I suspect they will learn a valuable lesson about why newcomers should remain silent. With that, his screen went black. His pod darkened, but Chen remained, a statue in the eye of a storm. Murmurs erupted around her. A few of the older species looked genuinely concerned by the Zitharan's declaration of intent. Others looked thrilled, eager to see humanity get swatted down. A few looked at Chen with what could only be described as pity. Ambassador Chen, Tom Von said, his playful tone completely gone. The Council cannot command a sovereign empire. If the Zitharan fleet violates your border, we will not intervene. Be warned, any hostile action you take against them will be seen as an act of war. Earth will stand alone in that conflict. We understand the situation perfectly, Chen said. Do you, though? A soft, ancient voice whispered from one of the highest pods. Ambassador Creel of the Vorten Collective, a being thousands of years old, leaned forward. Commander Velkoth does not bluff. That fleet of his will be escorted by at least 200 capital warships. And your entire navy consists of, what, 40 ships? I've seen the reports. Your weapons are underpowered and your shields are paper thin. 37 vessels are combat ready, Chen corrected her, her voice even. Then you must realize this is suicide, Creel said, her tone softening with something like kindness. Retract your declaration. Issue a formal apology to the Zitharans. Offer them a tribute. It is not too late to prevent this slaughter. Chen simply shook her head. The declaration will stand. Then your people are doomed, Creel stated flatly. You are infants playing with fire. I have watched empires far greater than yours turn to ash over foolish pride. The Zitharans will offer no mercy. We are not asking for mercy. Then what are you asking for? Creel pressed, clearly baffled. No one picks a fight they can't win unless they want something else. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Chen's face. It was a cold, hard glint in her eyes that made a few nearby ambassadors physically recoil. We want to be left alone, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried across the entire chamber. That is all we have ever wanted. We spent 10,000 years nearly destroying ourselves. We finally united, looked to the stars for a peaceful future, and in just 80 years, we've been invaded twice. Our freighters have been raided 7 times, and 3 of our colonies have been extorted by galactic thugs who view us as easy marks because we're the new kids on the block. Her voice remained quiet, but her words landed like hammer blows. We are tired, she continued. Tired of being the galaxy's punching bag. Tired of being tested. We are done explaining that we come in peace. So we are drawing a line in the sand, a very clear line, and we are informing the rest of you as politely as we can not to cross it. Or what? It was Velkoth. His pod had reactivated. He'd been listening the whole time. What will you do, little human? Your weapons are toys. Your shields are a joke. Your ships are slow. What could you possibly do to the Zitharan Empire? Chen turned to face his pod one last time. We have told you what we want, Commander. We have shown you our border. The choice to violate it is yours. She paused, and her next 3 words echoed in the dead silence. Don't say we didn't warn you. With a slight nod to Speaker Tom Von, she turned and walked away, her footsteps the only sound in the vast, stunned chamber. Pathetic, Velkoth scoffed into the quiet. 3 months, human. We'll see how tough your little warning is then. And maybe once we've flown through your precious space, your species will finally learn some humility." Chen paused at the huge doorway without looking back. 3 months, she agreed, her voice barely audible. And then she was gone. For a full minute, there was absolute silence. Finally, Tom Vaughn cleared his throat. "Are there any other matters?" "Wait." It was Ambassador Creel. She said they were informing us about what exactly, what is in that zone. But there was no one left to answer. Imagine a massive galactic council, a room filled with every alien species you could think of, all arguing. Suddenly, the one guy who never, ever speaks stands up. This was Ambassador Yolen of the Koran, a species so old and wise they made everyone else look like toddlers. The whole room went silent. "I have to say something," Yolen's voice echoed, full of a strange urgency. "I've been studying the humans." "It's a little hobby of mine, you know, learning about new species," he said, his gaze sweeping across the powerful warlords in the room. "I've read their history, looked at their art, even studied their philosophies. I've watched them." Then he added with a chilling quietness, "And I suggest we be very, very careful." Another ambassador, a massive, arrogant commander named Velkoth, scoffed. "Careful of what? How are they different?" Yolen seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "They are a species that spent 90% of their entire history at war with themselves. They built weapons that could crack their own planet and pointed them at each other. They cooked up plagues in labs that could wipe out billions. They found ways to poison their own air, boil their own oceans, and tear the very ground they stood on apart. And yet, against all odds, they're still here. They came to the brink of total self-destruction dozens of times," Yolen continued, "but every single time, something pulled them back." "What are you getting at?" Velkoth grumbled. "My point, Commander," Yolen said, "is that humans are masters of one thing above all else, finding new and incredibly efficient ways to destroy things. They spent thousands of years perfecting it. Now that they've finally stopped fighting each other, you have to ask yourself, where is all that terrifying creativity going now? Into building colonies and better engines, obviously," Velkoth sneered. "I'm not exactly shaking in my boots." "Maybe you should be," Yolen replied softly. "Commander, when a human gives you a warning, it's not a threat. It's a courtesy. It means they've already planned out exactly what they're going to do when you ignore it. It's just how their minds work." Velkoth's booming laughter filled the chamber. "Then let them plan. I can't wait to see what their preparations are. Maybe they built 40 ships instead of 37. Or maybe they made their shields 5% stronger. It won't matter." He slammed his fist on the console, cutting the transmission and plunging his communication pod into darkness. The meeting ended shortly after. As the ambassadors left, they gathered in little groups, gossiping about the dramatic showdown. Most of them agreed. Humanity was getting way too cocky for a newcomer. Some felt a little bad for the colonies that were about to get flattened. A few, like Yolen, shared their worries privately, but no one really listened. In 3 months, the massive Zetheran trade fleet would arrive in human territory. 300 warships, the biggest fleet the Empire had assembled in a generation. Velkoth had called it a demonstration, something the whole galaxy would remember forever. He was right about that, just not in the way he imagined. The Zetheran fleet showed up at the rendezvous point 3 days early. Commander Velkoth was a man who liked to make a statement, and this was a big one. 300 warships floated in the void, a swarm of deadly metal hornets. Their lights glittered like a brand new constellation against the deep black of space. Each ship was a monster, built for one thing, war. They were covered in armor so thick it could shrug off almost any weapon out there. Every single one of them had enough firepower to blast a small moon into gravel. Velkoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dominant Will, watching his fleet on the main screen. He felt a wave of pride wash over him. This was real power. This was the might that had crushed 47 star systems. And now, he was going to use it to teach a loudmouthed young species a lesson they would never, ever forget. "All ships are reporting ready, Commander," his tactical officer said. Excellent. Velkoth sank into his command chair, which was custom-built for his huge, four-armed body. Broadcast this on every channel. I want the whole sector to hear me. The communications officer got to work. A moment later, she gave him a nod. All channels are open, Commander. Any ship within 30 light-years will hear this. Velkoth leaned forward, his voice dropping into a formal, booming tone. This is High Commander Velkoth of the Zetheran Empire, speaking to all ships and settlements in this region. The fleet before you will now proceed along our ancient trade route, which happens to pass through territory the human species has foolishly tried to claim for themselves. We are doing this to make one thing crystal clear. Newcomers don't make the rules for their elders. The Zetheran Empire goes where it pleases, when it pleases. Any ship that tries to stop us will be committing an act of war and will be met with the full, overwhelming power of the Imperial fleet. This is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. He sliced his hand through the air, and the broadcast ended. Set our course, he commanded. Standard formation, full scanner sweeps. If the humans have so much as a single ship waiting for us, I want to know about it. The entire fleet began to move like a single, massive creature, hundreds of ships turning and accelerating in perfect sync towards the edge of human space. The sight was both beautiful in its perfection and terrifying in its power. Velkoth had chosen this route specifically because it cut right through the middle of the human exclusion zone. He wanted to make it impossible for them to pretend he had just accidentally strayed into their backyard. No, he was going to march straight through their living room and dare them to do something about it. The journey to the border took 6 hours. Velkoth spent the time reviewing attack plans. He didn't actually expect a fight, but on the off chance the humans were dumb enough to try something, he wanted the response to be instant and devastating. A quick, brutal smackdown would teach them a much better lesson than just flying by. Commander, his sensor officer called out, we're approaching the border coordinates the humans declared. Any sign of them? Velkoth asked. No, sir. Scanners are clear, just empty space. No ships, no space stations, not even a single defense satellite. There's nothing here. Velkoth felt a mix of smug satisfaction and a tiny bit of disappointment. Satisfaction because he was right. The humans were all talk. Disappointment because he wouldn't get to show off how powerful his fleet really was. Keep moving, he ordered. The fleet sailed silently across the invisible line that humans called their border. Velkoth made sure to log the exact time. He wanted history to record the moment the Zetheran Empire showed the galaxy what it thought of human demands. The space on the other side of the line looked exactly the same. Same distant stars, same endless black. The human exclusion zone was just another piece of empty, harmless void. Maintain course, Velkoth said. How long until we're through this so-called zone? At this speed, about 8 days, Commander, the navigator replied. All right, I want scanner sweeps every 10 minutes. If a single human ship so much as blips on our screens, I want to know immediately. The first 3 hours passed with absolutely nothing happening. The fleet pushed deeper and deeper into the zone, holding its flawless formation. Velkoth took a walk around his flagship, checking in on the crew. Everyone was on high alert, even though it seemed like it was for nothing. Back on the bridge, the giant tactical screen showed 300 perfect dots moving through space. Velkoth allowed himself a small, proud smile. This day would go down in history. It would be the day the Zetheran Empire called humanity's bluff and proved to the galaxy that their warnings were nothing but hot air. Right then, the sensor officer spoke up again. Commander, we have a contact. One small ship approaching from galactic north. Velkoth rushed over to the sensor station. What is it? It's definitely human, sir. The engine signature matches their standard designs. Its size suggests it's a science vessel, not a warship. Sir, it has no shields. A science vessel? Velkoth grumbled in disbelief. Put it on screen. The comms officer worked her console. They're responding, Commander. On screen now. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a tiny ship. It was so cramped it looked like a closet compared to Velkoth's command center. A human woman in a simple jumpsuit stood there, looking tired. Behind her, maybe 4 other people were at their stations. This is Captain Maria Torres of the research vessel Cassandra, the woman said, her her voice sounding bored, like she was reading a grocery list. "You are currently trespassing in an Earth sovereign exclusion zone. Turn your fleet around immediately. This is your final warning." Velkoth just stared at the screen, utterly baffled. Then, a low chuckle escaped his lips, and soon he was laughing out loud. All around him, his bridge crew joined in. "My final warning?" he repeated, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "Captain, look around you. I have 300 warships here. Any one of them could turn your little tin can into space dust with a single blast, and you're giving me a warning?" Torres gave a slow nod. "I see your fleet, Commander. It's quite impressive, but I'm still asking you to turn around." "Or what?" Faloth's good mood was quickly evaporating. "What's your tiny little science ship going to do, ram us?" "I'm not going to do anything," Torres said calmly, "but if you continue on this path, something else will. Please, Commander, turn back. Just take the long way. It's only 6 more days, a small price to pay." "The only price being paid today," Velkoth snarled, "is the one for your insolence. You have 30 seconds to move your ship, or we'll move it for you." Torres shut her eyes for a split second. When she opened them, Velkoth saw something in her gaze he absolutely did not expect. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even defiance. It was a profound sadness. "Then I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I'm sorry we couldn't make you understand. I'm sorry for what is about to happen to you. And I'm sorry we worked so hard to find another way, but you've left us no choice." 20 seconds, Velkoth snapped. "My crew and I, we all volunteered for this," Torres continued, her words tumbling out a little faster. "We all put our names forward, knowing the risks. We even drew straws to see who would get the honor of being the last voice you heard, the last person to try and warn you. I won." 10 seconds. "Our families have been told. They're proud of us. We all recorded messages for them. Mine said, 'Fire,'" Velkoth ordered. The weapons officer pressed a single button. A blinding spear of superheated plasma tore across the void between the dominant will and the Cassandra. In less than a heartbeat, the small research vessel, making no attempt to evade, simply ceased to exist in a silent, brilliant explosion of light. They thought they'd just swatted a fly, but what they'd really done was step on a landmine. You're going to want to stick around to see how this one tiny ship brought an entire armada to its knees without ever firing a shot. "Resume course," Commander Velkoth ordered from the bridge. But he felt no victory, only a creeping sense of unease. The human captain's final words haunted him. She had been so serene, so at peace with her fate, as if her own destruction was just the first step in a much larger strategy. He forced the thought from his mind. The Cassandra was a gnat, a minor annoyance. Its obliteration meant nothing. He barked, "All ships, hold formation, proceed as planned." The fleet of 300 warships pushed forward, slicing through the patch of space where a human ship had been turned to atoms moments before. 2 hours went by, then 3. Velkoth stayed on the bridge, rotating his crew for rest. Something felt terribly wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Space was black and empty. The ship's scanners showed nothing. Every system on every ship was running at 100%. "And yet, sir," the sensor officer reported, her voice thin with confusion, "I'm picking something up. It's not a vessel. It's not made of anything solid. Just some very strange readings." "Explain strange." "I'm not sure how, Commander. The sensors are detecting ripples in local space-time. They're not harmful, just odd. It's like space itself is vibrating." "A localized gravity distortion," Velkoth offered. "Some natural event." "Perhaps," she said, not sounding convinced, "but I've never seen one like this. It's almost—" She stopped, her eyes glued to her screen. "Sir, it's pacing us. The readings are maintaining a fixed distance from our fleet, matching our velocity perfectly." That sent a jolt of real alarm through Velkoth. "How is that even possible?" "I have no idea, sir." "Are we in any danger?" "I don't believe so. The readings are faint. Whatever is out there, it isn't affecting our systems. It's just following us." Velkoth made a call. "Boost the scanner power to maximum. I want a complete breakdown of this phenomenon, and broadcast a message to the entire fleet. Ask if anyone else is seeing this. The confirmations flooded in within minutes. Every last ship in the fleet was getting the exact same readings. This strange ripple in space was all around them, a ghostly bubble shadowing their every move. Could it be a fleet-wide sensor glitch? Velkoth asked. Across 300 ships, sir? All with different sensor packages from different makers? The odds are astronomical. So what in the world was it? No one could even guess. The fleet pressed on, but the bizarre readings remained. They never intensified, never faded. They just hung around the fleet like a silent, invisible shroud that perfectly copied every maneuver. Over the next several hours, other small issues began to surface. Tiny glitches in the navigation computers, brief, unexplained power fluctuations and communication lags that should have been instantaneous. None of it was critical, nothing that would normally cause panic, but the sheer volume of these little annoyances created a thick fog of anxiety that settled over every ship. Velkoth ordered a complete diagnostic of every system on his flagship. The reports came back spotless. The ship's computer insisted everything was operating perfectly. But the glitches persisted, as if some invisible gremlin was messing with their tech in a way their own instruments couldn't detect. "Commander," his comms officer called out, her voice tight with worry. "It's the Relentless, a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. They've gone dark." Velkoth whirled around to face her. "What do you mean, dark?" "They're not responding to any of our hails, sir. Their icon is still on our sensors, holding perfect formation, but we're getting total radio silence. Are we being jammed?" "No signs of any jamming, sir. The channel is crystal clear. They're simply not picking up." A cold dread started to pool in Velkoth's gut. "Signal the 2 ships nearest to the Relentless. Order them to get a visual confirmation. I want eyes on that ship now." He waited, his gaze locked on the tactical map. The Relentless continued on, its little green icon holding its position flawlessly. Its engines were active. Its systems appeared to be fully operational. So why wasn't anyone answering the phone? "Sir," the comms officer said, her voice now trembling, "the ships we sent to investigate the Relentless, they've gone dark too." The cold dread in Velkoth's stomach turned to solid ice. "How many?" "2 of them, sir. Both destroyers. The Iron Fang and the Stormbreaker. They were closing in on the Relentless to get a look. Both of them cut out about 30 seconds ago." Velkoth stared at the tactical display. 3 ships, all showing green, fully functional status icons, were now completely unresponsive. "Are they still moving?" "Yes, sir, holding formation perfectly." "Then who is flying them?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Velkoth made a decision he knew he might instantly regret. "Halt the fleet! All ships, full stop, now!" The order blasted through the comms network. 300 massive warships began to decelerate, grinding to a halt in the deep black of space. Well, 297 of them, the Relentless, the Iron Fang, and the Stormbreaker, just kept going, maintaining their previous speed and heading as they pulled away from the main fleet. "They're ignoring the stop order," the helmsman stated the obvious. Velkoth watched the 3 green icons shrink on his display, sailing off into the void, away from the protection of the Armada. He waited, expecting them to stop, to turn around, to do anything, to signal that living beings were still at the controls. They did nothing. They just flew in a perfectly straight line. Further and further into the forbidden zone they flew, until they were little more than specks. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered in awe, "they're just gone." "What?" "The 3 ships. They've vanished, not destroyed. There was no explosion, no wreckage. They just disappeared. Our sensors show empty space where they ought to be." Velkoth suddenly found it hard to breathe. All around the bridge, the crew stared at their screens in stunned silence. "Find them!" he roared. "Full power sensor sweep! They have to be out there somewhere!" For a solid hour, they scanned. Long range, short range, every visual and energy spectrum they had. Nothing. 3 capital warships, each with a crew of 200, had simply ceased to be. And in the back of his mind, Velkoth heard Captain Torres's voice once more. I'm sorry for what is about to happen. What had those humans unleashed? What kind of cosmic nightmare had he just steered his entire fleet into? Commander Velkoth had been awake for 36 straight hours. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Will, staring at tactical screens that were showing him an impossible reality. Around him, his crew moved with a quiet, desperate energy, hunting for an answer that simply didn't exist. The fleet had now lost 47 ships, not blown up, not disabled, just gone, erased, as if they were never there to begin with. One moment, they were a green icon on the screen, holding tight in their formation. The next, there was only empty space. No fireballs, no debris, not even a single distress call. Nothing. The disappearances had no rhyme or reason that Velkoth could decipher. Ships on the edge of the formation vanished. Ships buried deep in the center vanished. Giant battlecruisers and small escort frigates were taken without any pattern. The only constant was that the moment a ship stopped responding to hails, it was already a ghost. Within minutes, sometimes seconds, it would just blink out of existence. "Status report," Velkoth demanded. His voice was hoarse from barking orders. "Fleet strength is down to 253 ships, Commander," the tactical officer replied. She looked utterly exhausted. The vibrant sheen of her scales had dulled to a dusty gray, and her hands shook as she worked her console. "We've lost another 6 ships in the last hour." 6 ships. That was over 12,200 of his people, just gone. "Any damage reports from the fleet?" "No damage to report, sir. Every ship that hasn't vanished is showing green across the board. All systems are nominal." And that was the part that was driving him mad. The remaining ships were perfectly fine. There were no malfunctions, no battle scars, no signs they were under any kind of attack. My crew started getting the creeps, saying it felt like something was out there just staring at them. But every system check came back green, right up to the second the ships blinked out of existence. "What are the sensors picking up? Those spatial distortions?" "They're getting worse, Commander. The ripple effect is way more intense now. Some of my sensor techs are reporting some really weird feedback. They're saying it's like space itself is alive out here." Velkoth felt his jaw clench. "That's not scientifically possible." "No, sir, it's not." He spun around to his comms officer. "Have the humans said anything?" "Not a word, sir. We're blasting requests on every known frequency, asking for a talk, an explanation, anything at all. We've got nothing but static." Either they couldn't hear him, or they were flat out ignoring him. Or, Velkoth thought with a grim twist in his gut, maybe they were all dead too. If this thing that was erasing his fleet was also wiping out human colonies, there might not be anyone left to talk to. But he didn't buy that. A cold certainty deep inside told him the humans were out there, watching this whole thing unfold. "Commander!" the navigator yelled, his voice strained with panic. "We've got an issue with the jump coordinates." "What kind of issue?" "I've been running escape routes for the last hour, dozens of them to anywhere I can think of, but every single time, no matter where I aim us, the calculation shows us jumping deeper into the exclusion zone." Velkoth was at his side in 3 long strides. "Show me." The navigator threw the calculations onto the main view screen. Velkoth stared, his own training in advanced physics screaming that the numbers were impossible. But the officer was right. Every single path out, every escape vector just curved right back toward the center of human space. It was like the universe had been bent into a giant cosmic drain, and they were all circling the inescapable pull. "This just can't be happening," Velkoth whispered. "To pull something like this off, you'd have to be warping space-time on a scale I can't even wrap my head around. The energy required would be godlike." The navigation officer looked up at him, his face ghost white. "I know, sir, but the math doesn't lie. We can't jump out. We're trapped." That one word, trapped, just hung in the air on the bridge like a death sentence, boxed in. "Fine, we do it the hard way," Velkoth announced. "Plot a course to the border on sublight engines. We'll crawl out the way we came." "We tried that, sir. The ships that attempted to turn around, they vanished even faster than the ones that kept going. It's like going backward triggers it." "Then forward it is." "Sir, forward puts us right in the heart of the zone, straight into human territory." Velkoth fought the urge to scream, forcing his voice to stay level. "Are you telling me the only direction we're allowed to travel is straight for Earth?" "That's what it looks like, sir." A new voice cut through the tension from the comm station. "Commander, incoming transmission. It's on a human frequency." Every single head on the bridge whipped around. After hours of being ignored, the humans were finally talking. "On screen," Velkoth ordered. The main view screen shimmered to life, revealing not a person, but just a few simple, cold words. Stark white letters on a pitch-black background. Our translation software took a half-second to catch up before displaying the message in our language. "You were warned." That was all it said. 3 words. Then the channel went dead. Velkoth just stared at the empty screen for what felt like an eternity. The entire bridge crew was frozen, caught in a stunned silence. "Reply," he finally managed to say. "Tell them, message received. Tell them we are requesting immediate negotiations for our withdrawal." The comms officer's fingers were a blur on his console. "Message away, sir." Then they waited. 5 minutes crawled by. Then 10. Then 20. Absolute silence. "Sir," the tactical officer said, her voice shaking just a little, "we've lost 3 more ships just in the time we've been sitting here." Velkoth's 4 hands clenched into rock-hard fists. His breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. He had marched his fleet straight into this meat grinder. He had dismissed their warnings as empty threats. He had personally given the order to destroy the Cassandra and had laughed at Captain Torres's dying words. And now, his people were paying the price for his arrogance. "All ships," he said, opening a fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Velkoth. We have entered a situation we do not understand. This appears to be some kind of advanced human defense system. We cannot jump. We cannot retreat without accelerating our losses. Our only viable option is to push forward and hope to God we can make it through the exclusion zone before—" He couldn't make himself say the rest. Before what? Before they were all just erased from reality? "Maintain tight formation," he commanded. "I want every ship to report any anomaly, no matter how small, the second you see it. Navigation, get us the absolute fastest route through this hell. I don't care if it takes us past Earth's doorstep. We have to get out of this sector." "Sir," his sensor officer whispered, her voice barely audible. "You need to see this." Velkoth moved to her station. She brought up a display of the space immediately around their ship. At first, it was just blackness, but then she began to cycle through different sensor frequencies, shifting into parts of the spectrum our Zithan eyes can't see. Velkoth's blood turned to ice in his veins. We weren't flying through empty space, not at all. We were inside something, some kind of unbelievably massive structure. It was like a giant, cosmic spiderweb stretching in all directions, farther than our sensors could even reach. And there were countless threads, tiny filaments of neither matter nor energy that connected this web to every single one of his ships. "What in all the worlds am I looking at?" he breathed. "I don't know, sir. It's been around us this entire time. We just couldn't see it until I did a full spectrum sweep. I think it's a field of some kind, a network. It has us completely caged in." "And the ships that vanished?" She replayed the sensor logs from just before a destroyer disappeared. On the screen, Velkoth watched in horror as the thread attached to his destroyer suddenly pulsed with a faint light. It glowed, and then it tightened. The ship itself seemed to crumple, its physical form twisting in ways that defied physics, and then it just popped out of existence. The thread that had held it lingered for a moment, almost as if it was satisfied, before fading back into the network. "It's eating them," the sensor officer whispered, her voice filled with terror. "The field, this thing, it's consuming our ships." For the first time in his long and decorated career, Velkoth felt true, gut-twisting fear. He'd fought in dozens of wars, faced death countless times, but he had always known what he was fighting. You can fight another ship, you can counter its weapons, you can out-tactic an enemy fleet. But this? How do you fight the fabric of space itself? How can you possibly attack an enemy you can't see, can't target, and can't even begin to comprehend? "Commander!" The comms officer's shout broke him out of his spiraling thoughts. "Another incoming message. It's not the humans, sir. It's from the Endless Conquest, Captain Than's battlecruiser. They're saying they see something. Put him on." Captain Than's face filled the screen. He was an old warrior, older than Velkoth himself, a decorated hero from a dozen campaigns, and in all the years Velkoth had known him, he had never once seen the man look scared. Right now, he looked terrified. "Commander, I don't even know how to describe this. My crew is seeing things, visual static, shadows zipping between the ships where nothing should be. And sir, 3 of my crewmen just disappeared from inside sealed compartments on my ship." "Disappeared from inside the ship?" "Yes, sir. We've got it on security feeds. One second, they're walking down a corridor. The next, they're just gone, like they stepped through a door that wasn't there and just vanished." Before Velkoth could even wrap his mind around that, another klaxon started screaming. "Multiple ships are reporting the same thing," the tactical officer shouted, her voice starting to break. "Crew are disappearing from all over the fleet. Equipment is vanishing right off its mounts. Some ships are reporting entire sections have gone dark. When they send teams to investigate, the sections are just empty, stripped bare, like everything inside, including the search party, simply ceased to exist." The situation was spiraling out of control, faster than Velkoth could even think. This wasn't just about ships getting picked off anymore. Whatever had them trapped was now reaching inside their hulls, plucking out his people and their equipment like a predator meticulously stripping meat from a bone. "All ships, full lockdown procedures, now," Velkoth ordered, though a part of him knew it was a pointless gesture. "Nobody goes anywhere alone. I want teams of at least 4 at all times. Seal all non-essential decks." The orders went out. They were followed instantly, and they made absolutely no difference at all. For the next 6 hours, Velkoth was forced to sit and watch his command die, not in a glorious battle, but slowly, meticulously, as if some unseen entity was savoring every moment. It was taking its sweet time because it had all the time in the universe. And his fleet had nowhere left to go. Ships kept vanishing. Now they were disappearing too, sometimes 3 at a time. The web around them seemed to glow just a little brighter with each ship it devoured, as if it were feeding. Crewmen were erased from locked rooms, from guarded stations, from the very command bridges of their own vessels. One moment they were part of the fleet, and the next, they were just gone. They left nothing behind but petrified witnesses who couldn't process the impossible event they'd just seen. A few of the ships managed to broadcast for a few seconds, and we could hear the voices of their missing crews on the comms, screaming, begging for help, claiming they were trapped in another place, somewhere wrong, where it was agonizing just to exist. Then, just as suddenly, the screaming would cut off and the channel would go dead silent. Commander Velkoth got a report that the Iron Storm, one of his most powerful battlecruisers, was found floating dead in space without a single living soul aboard. All 800 crew members had simply vanished from a ship that had no damage, not even a scorch mark. The vessel was pristine, clean, its autopilot still engaged. It was just completely empty. When a rescue team boarded the cruiser to investigate what happened, they vanished too. After that, Velkoth gave the order to stand down. There was no sense in it. Whatever was doing this wasn't following any rules of warfare he understood, and every attempt to figure it out only resulted in more of his people dying. "What's our fleet count?" he asked, his voice sounding hollow and distant. "We have 12 ships left, Commander," the tactical officer answered. He could tell she had been crying, and he couldn't blame her. "At this rate, we project a total loss of the fleet in less than 18 hours. 18 hours. In less than a single day, his entire force of 300 ships and over 500,000 of his people would be erased from the universe. Keep trying to contact the humans," Velkoth commanded, his voice trembling. Tell them we surrender. Offer them anything. Tell them we recognize their ownership of this entire sector. Say whatever they want to hear. Just get them to make this stop." The communications officer's fingers flew across the console, blasting out pleas on every frequency they had, begging, bargaining, promising the galaxy itself if the humans would just, please, pick up the call. For 3 torturous hours, they launched 147 distress calls into the blackness, and only silence replied. The Zithan war fleet, a military power that had cracked worlds in half, could do nothing but push forward into an invisible trap that was dismantling them ship by ship. A strange, pulsing energy net surrounded them, feeding on their fleet, and they were completely powerless. Commander Velkoth couldn't get the face of the human captain they had just destroyed out of his head, her sorrowful eyes, her final plea. She knew this was waiting for them. All of them knew. The humans had tried to warn them, had tried to save them from their own arrogance, but the Zythan High Command had been too proud to listen. "Commander," his sensor officer stammered, his voice thin with terror, "I'm detecting something up ahead. A ship. It's a human design." A surge of wild, desperate hope shot through Velkoth. "Put them on the main screen, now!" he yelled. "On it, sir. They're hailing us." A calm human face appeared on the view screen. He was a middle-aged man in a crisp military uniform who looked at Velkoth with an expression that was almost pity. "Commander Velkoth," the man began, "my name is Captain James Rivera. I'm here to serve as a witness." "A witness?" The word didn't register with Velkoth. "We need your help. Your weapon system, whatever it is ripping my fleet to shreds. You have to shut it down." Rivera slowly shook his head with a look of genuine regret. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Nobody can. The second you entered the exclusion zone without authorization, the defense grid activated automatically. It's impossible to shut it down while unauthorized vessels are still inside." "Then authorize us. Please, we'll turn around and leave immediately." "You can't leave," Rivera said gently. "The grid won't allow it. I'm sorry, Commander." "I truly am, but we warned you time and time again. You chose not to listen." "This is a massacre!" Velkoth bellowed. "No," Rivera corrected him, his tone even. "This is self-defense. You brought a military fleet into our sovereign territory after we specifically told you not to. You destroyed our ship, the Cassandra, when it made one final attempt to save you. Every life lost today is a direct consequence of your own choices. We didn't know. We had no idea what you had built." "That is precisely why we warned you," Rivera said. "It's why the exclusion zone was created. It's why we begged the Galactic Council to ensure every species understood that our borders were not negotiable. We did everything we could to prevent this day from happening. But ultimately, you left us with no other option." On Velkoth's tactical display, 3 more of his ships blinked out of existence. "What is it?" Velkoth asked, his voice cracking with despair. "What have you done to this section of the galaxy?" Rivera took a long pause, then seemed to reach a decision. "During our last global war, before we unified our planet, we designed weapons we prayed we would never have to use. One was a theoretical model for weaponizing space-time itself, creating fields that could trap, contain, or simply erase anything that entered. We never used it on ourselves. We buried the research, locked it deep underground. But when we traveled to the stars and discovered how hostile the galaxy was, and how many races would view us as an easy prize," he trailed off, "we built 50 of them. 50 fully automated defense platforms hidden throughout the exclusion zone. Each one generates a field that can detect, analyze, and neutralize any unauthorized ship. They're powered by quantum vacuum energy. They can run for 10,000 years without a single repair." "You've turned your entire border into a cosmic graveyard," Velkoth whispered, horrified. "We've turned our border into a warning that has teeth," Rivera corrected. "Every other species in the galaxy uses fleets to defend their territory. Ships can be broken, fleets can be defeated. We decided that anyone who tried to invade human space wouldn't be fighting human ships. They would be fighting space itself, and you can't win a war against space." Velkoth's tactical map now showed only 87 ships left. As he stared, the number dropped to 84. "You're monsters," he gasped. "Perhaps," Rivera admitted. "But we are alive, we are free, and our home will never be threatened again." He paused. "For whatever it's worth, Commander, I truly am sorry. I hope you understand that we never wanted this. We just wanted to be left alone." The transmission ended. Velkoth stood on the bridge, a solitary figure watching his fleet disappear one ship at a time, knowing with a cold, terrifying certainty that he would not live to see another day. His final thought, as the reality around his own ship began to glow and warp, was that the humans hadn't been lying. They had tried to warn him, and he had been too arrogant to listen. For the first time in 300 years, the Galactic Council chamber was at full capacity. Every species, every coalition, every major political power had sent a delegate. They all sat in their designated pods in a thick, heavy silence, waiting for the session to begin. It had been 2 weeks since the Zithran fleet had entered the human exclusion zone, 2 weeks since 300 warships and over 500,000 individuals had vanished without a trace. The silence filling the chamber was not out of respect. It was out of sheer terror. Speaker Tom Von floated up from his pod, his intricate beak trembling slightly as he began. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now in order. The matter at hand is the complete disappearance of the Zithran Imperial Trade Fleet. Their last known position was within the territory claimed by the human species from the planet Earth. He paused, taking a breath as if bracing himself. Ambassador Chen of Earth has agreed to speak to the Council. I must remind all of you, this is a diplomatic inquiry, not a trial. All delegates will maintain order and allow the ambassador to speak without being interrupted. Sarah Chen entered the chamber from the main doors, walking across the massive floor by herself to take her place in the center. She looked exactly as she had 3 months ago, wearing the same simple gray suit, her expression an unreadable mask of calm. She didn't look like someone who had just overseen what might be the single largest mass killing in the history of the galaxy. Ambassador Chen, Tom Von began cautiously, this council would like any information you can provide regarding the fate of the Zithran fleet. Do you have any answers for us? Yes, Chen said. That one, simple word, sent a jolt of shock through the entire room. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't claiming ignorance. Just, yes. Then please, Tom Von pressed on, tell us what took place. Chen looked around the chamber, her eyes meeting those of several different ambassadors. When she finally spoke, her voice was perfectly clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. The Zithran fleet entered our exclusion zone despite our repeated warnings. They were informed of the boundaries. They were told not to cross them. They chose to proceed regardless. Our automated defense systems activated exactly as they were designed to. The fleet was neutralized. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts in a dozen different languages created a deafening roar of disbelief, fear, and outrage. Tom Von had to slam his gavel for order 3 times before the noise subsided enough for him to be heard. Are you admitting you did this? Velkoth's replacement, Acting Commander Vishkal, demanded from his station, his scales flushed dark with rage. I'm confirming that our automated defense system is functioning as intended, Ambassador Chen replied, her voice unnervingly calm. 500,000 souls, he screamed. You annihilated 500,000 of my people, and you have the nerve to sit there and calmly admit to it. Chen's gaze shifted to meet his. Yes, Commander. I'm truly sorry for what happened to your people, Ambassador Chen said, her voice a quiet storm of ice and sympathy. But they were given every chance. We warned you in the council meeting 3 months ago. We sent another warning when your fleet crossed into our space. Then, a single science vessel, the Cassandra, made a final, desperate plea. And your High Commander blew it out of the sky. He treated a message of peace as an act of war and flew his armada headfirst into the consequences he was warned about. The outcome of that choice rests entirely on his shoulders. You massacred them! Vreshkal roared. We defended our home, Chen corrected him, her tone perfectly even. There is a very important difference. This council must denounce this, Vreshkal begged, his eyes scanning the chamber for support. We cannot let one species wipe out an entire fleet without answering for it. It was the Zithrans today, but it could be any of you tomorrow. He wasn't wrong, and you could see a ripple of agreement pass through the council, while others just looked petrified. Then, Ambassador Creel of the Van Collective spoke, her voice cutting through the noise like ancient cracking ice. Ambassador Chen, I have one question that I believe gets to the heart of this matter. You claim your defense systems responded as designed. Could you tell us what these systems are? How did they manage to make 300 warships vanish so completely that there isn't a shred of wreckage, not a single body, not even a whisper of an energy trail? Chen paused for a long moment. To explain our technology in detail, she finally said, would mean sharing top-secret military intelligence with every government in this room. That is not something we do. But given how serious this is, the government of Earth has allowed me to provide a limited explanation. She tapped a device in her palm, and enormous holographic images flickered to life above her, filling the air with impossibly complex formulas, twisting maps of space-time, and designs that looked less like blueprints and more like bizarre cosmic art. During the last great war on our planet, before we were a united people, some nations were working on theoretical weapons that could manipulate space and time. The projects were shut down, considered too dangerous and morally wrong. But when we reached for the stars and found out just how many bullies were on the galactic playground, we dusted off that old research. It took us 60 years to perfect the theory and another 20 to build the hardware. The result is something we call the exclusion net. She gestured, and the display shifted to a map of their solar system. 50 glowing dots appeared, perfectly spaced. 50 automated platforms, each one projects a field that covers our entire territory. These fields overlap, creating an invisible, unbreakable net of warped space-time. When a ship enters our space without permission, the net turns on and does what? Creel insisted. It removes them, Chen said simply. The ships aren't destroyed, they're not vaporized, they are folded into tiny pocket dimensions, separate realities that exist alongside our own but can never ever touch it. From our perspective, they just cease to exist. A stunned, horrified gasp echoed through the chamber. Some delegates made sacred gestures to ward off evil, others just stared, their faces blank with disbelief. "Are you telling us," Tom Von said, his voice trembling, "that the entire Zitharan fleet is still out there, just trapped in another dimension?" "You could say that," Chen confirmed, though the word "exists" might not be accurate. These pocket dimensions were never meant to hold life. They don't have laws of physics we would recognize, and time doesn't exist. Anything sent there is instantly flash frozen in a state we call quantum stasis. It is neither alive nor dead. "That's monstrous," someone whispered from the crowd. "And it's effective," Chen shot back, her voice as cold and empty as the weapon she was describing. Imagine thinking you're the toughest guy in the schoolyard, so you walk up to the quiet new kid and punch him in the gut, only to find out his dad is the heavyweight champion of the world. That's pretty much what just happened to the Zithan Empire. "You've condemned my people to an eternity of torment," the Zithan commander Vreshkal screamed, his voice raw with pain. "Stuck in some living hell because of your exclusion net. If you've ever been underestimated and wished you could show people what you were capable of, you need to hear what happened next." "That's a very colorful way of looking at it," Ambassador Chen replied, her calm voice a chilling counterpoint to his rage. "Actually, it's the exact opposite of torment. They feel nothing. For them, time is frozen. They can't suffer because they can't experience anything at all. It's less like a prison and more like being put into a dreamless sleep you never wake from." The ancient reptilian ambassador Creel leaned forward. "Is there any way to bring them back?" "Theoretically, yes. If we were to deactivate the platforms, the energy fields would collapse, and anything trapped inside would reappear in normal space," Chen said. "But shutting down the net would leave our home world completely exposed. We have no intention of ever doing that." Vreshkal slammed his fist on the console. "So they're gone forever." Chen's expression turned to stone. "They were gone the moment Commander Veliksoth decided our warnings were a joke and ordered his fleet into our territory." "We could not have been more clear, Commander," Chen said, her gaze sweeping across the stunned council members. "We broadcasted warnings on every possible frequency. Your High Commander made a bet. He bet that a young species like humanity was just putting on a brave face. He bet we didn't have the power to stop his mighty war fleet." She let the silence hang in the air. "He lost the bet, and that is a tragedy, but it is not our crime." A deep quiet settled over the chamber. You could almost hear the gears turning in everyone's head as they completely re-evaluated humanity's position in the galaxy. The council speaker, a being of glowing energy named Tom Von, finally spoke. "Ambassador Chen, this council has much to consider, but I have one final question. Now that this weapon's existence is known,
Cookie.
And you've even given us a peek at how it functions, Tom Von went on. Aren't you afraid that other species will now race to develop their own or create a way to defeat yours? For the first time, a small, icy smile touched Chen's lips. They are welcome to try, she said. The quantum physics involved took our species centuries to understand. Even with the information I've shared today, it would take your brightest minds hundreds of years just to get started. And by that point, she added, our technology will be generations beyond this. The exclusion net that has you so concerned, that's our old model, speaker. We're already fielding generations 2 and 3. She let that sink in. But more than anything, she finished, her voice turning cold as ice, we hope no one is ever foolish enough to make us do this again. This is the final warning. Earth has borders. They are not suggestions. Cross them and you won't be fought. You will simply cease to exist. That isn't a threat. It's a promise. And what if we declare this a war crime? The Zithran ambassador shrieked. What if the council votes to punish you and demands you dismantle these atrocities? Chen's polite smile completely vanished. Then we will respectfully tell you no, and we will leave this galactic council. We came here seeking peace and partnership. If this body cannot guarantee our right to exist undisturbed, she continued, if our simple request to be left alone is considered an act of war, then we have no place here. We will return to our home system, lock the gate, and sever all ties with the rest of the galaxy. You would cut yourselves off completely? Creel asked, clearly shocked. No trade, no cultural exchange, nothing? If that is the price of our safety, then yes, Chen said without a hint of doubt. We survived on our own for 10,000 years on one little planet. We can do it again in our own corner of the galaxy. It would be a loss, certainly, but it's far better than having to constantly fight off bullies just because we're new to the neighborhood. She looked around this chamber one last time. We came out here looking for friends, she said, her voice dropping to an almost mournful tone, but all we found were predators, so we were forced to become something that predators know to stay away from. That isn't the story we wanted for ourselves, but it's the one you gave us. The Zithan Empire chose to gamble with their soldiers' lives. The consequences of that decision belong to them, not to us. With that, she gave a respectful nod to Speaker Tom Von and began to walk away. Wait! A new voice shouted. It was Ambassador Yulin. His personal transport pod floated down to the floor, a shocking break in protocol. Ambassador Chen, may I have a private word? Chen stopped, her curiosity piqued. Of course, Ambassador. As the two of them disappeared into a side room, the main hall erupted into chaos. The moment the door sealed, Yulin's professional mask slipped. I tried to tell him, he whispered. 3 months ago, I told Velixoth that humans were not to be trifled with. I told him you don't make empty threats. He refused to listen. I know, Chen said softly. We heard the entire exchange. We appreciate you trying to reason with him. Do you appreciate it enough to tell me the real story? Yulin shot back, his gaze locking onto hers. What you told the council about pocket dimensions and stasis fields, that was the simplified version, wasn't it? There's more to your exclusion net than that. Chen met his stare for a long, heavy moment before giving a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, there's much more. Are you going to tell me what it is? Why is it so important for you to know? Chen countered. Because my entire career has been dedicated to studying your species, Yulin answered. And if I've learned anything about humanity, it's that you're masters of thinking 10 steps ahead. You don't have just one plan. You have plans inside of plans, with contingencies for your contingencies. That net is a terrifying piece of technology, he admitted, but I simply can't accept that it's the only trick you have up your sleeve. Chen's expression was unreadable, a perfect poker face, but her silence was all the answer he needed. I will tell you this much, she said at last. The platforms generating those pockets in space, they are 100% defensive. They only activate when an unauthorized vessel crosses our line. However, we also possess offensive capabilities, weapons that can strike across any distance, targeting anyone who designates themselves as a threat to us. We have never used them. We pray we never have to, but they exist. Hidden somewhere in your exclusion zone, Ulene guessed. Chen shook her head. Hidden everywhere. The reveal landed like a physical blow. We've had 80 years to prepare, Ambassador. 80 years to plant our seeds and build our fail-safes. We made sure the survival of Earth would never hinge on defending one small corner of the skies. We are a careful people. Some might call us paranoid. Perhaps they're right. But that paranoia is what has kept us alive. A chill ran down Ulene's spine. Are you saying Earth can hit any target anywhere in the galaxy at a moment's notice? We're saying that anyone who harms Earth will have a lifetime to regret it. A very short lifetime, Chen corrected him. We don't broadcast this because we aren't looking for a fight, but if anyone ever pushes us into a corner, we will do absolutely anything to survive. That's the real purpose of the exclusion net, Ambassador. It isn't just a shield for our home. It's a message that we have considered every possible threat, and we have an answer for all of them. She walked toward the door, pausing for a final word. And thank you, sincerely, for trying to warn them, she said, her voice softening. The galaxy is in desperate need of more reasonable voices like yours. I hope that one day, people will finally start to listen. Until then, we'll keep our defenses up and hope the fate of the Zythan fleet serves as a lesson for everyone else. With that, she left, leaving Ambassador Ulene to grapple with the terrifying new reality of what humanity had become. They weren't conquerors bent on building an empire. They were something far more formidable. They were survivors, so fiercely committed to their own existence that they had quietly turned themselves into the one force the rest of the galaxy would learn to avoid at all costs. Back in the main chamber, the furious debates were still echoing off the walls, but Ulene knew it was all just theater now. The council would issue a formal condemnation of Earth's actions. They would file official protests. They would demand greater transparency in the future. And in the end, they would do absolutely nothing. Because no one, not a single soul, wanted to be the one to find out what other surprises humanity had waiting in the wings. The Zythan Empire had bet the farm and lost everything. Nobody was eager to repeat that mistake. Just 6 months later, the galactic map looked completely different. The most startling change was the Zythan Empire itself. It had ceased to exist. Without its top military command and the iron fist that held its territories together, the empire dissolved like a sandcastle in the tide. 47 star systems that had been crushed under Zythan rule for generations rose up in unison. Some declared their independence outright. Others scrambled to forge new alliances. A few descended into civil war, but on the whole, a massive wave of liberation was sweeping across the galaxy. The council deployed a handful of peacekeepers, but mostly adopted a wait-and-see approach. There was zero appetite for trying to glue the old empire back together, especially when the alternative meant letting countless enslaved populations taste freedom for the first time. Acting Commander Freshcall, the same officer who had screamed at Chen, tried to keep his crumbling empire intact for 3 weeks before he finally accepted the inevitable. He broadcast one final galaxy-wide message. "The Zythan Empire is no more," he announced, his voice heavy with the weight of his failure. "We built our power on the lie that we were invincible. Earth showed us the truth. Our grand fleet, our revered commander, our national pride. All of it vanished in an instant, all because we were too arrogant to believe we could be beaten. Let our total collapse serve as a cautionary tale for anyone else who believes might makes right," he said. "The rules of the galaxy have just been rewritten." The very next day, he resigned his post and retired to a remote farming colony, never again to speak of the fleet or his historic failure. In the Galactic Council, the change was less dramatic but just as profound. A new chapter had begun, one where the quiet newcomer to the galactic stage was suddenly being treated with a great deal of respect. All at once, the galaxy seemed to find its manners. Species known for their blustering and saber-rattling began to choose their words with extreme care. Ambitious plans for military expansion were quietly shelved. Trade disputes that might have once ignited a conflict were now being resolved through, of all things, diplomacy. The reason for this sudden outbreak of civility was the massive, unspoken truth in every room: Earth's exclusion zone. Nobody wanted to talk about it, But it was always there, shaping every treaty, every negotiation, and every strategic calculation. A single question hung in the air. If humanity could make the Zithrans disappear just like that, what could they do to us? Ambassador Chen experienced the change firsthand during council meetings. Delegates who previously wouldn't have given her the time of day now approached her with a kind of delicate, almost fearful reverence. Some tried to cozy up to her, fishing for advice and clearly hoping to get into Earth's good graces. Others gave her a wide berth, as if terrified that a simple diplomatic disagreement might result in them being erased from existence. It was completely draining. "They're afraid of us now," she admitted to her aide one evening, after a session thick with more tension than a gas giant. "That's the last thing we ever wanted. We just wanted to be left alone." "But being left alone in this galaxy requires being feared," her aide pointed out. "There isn't a middle ground out here. No one respects a fence unless they know it's electrified." Chen let out a long sigh. "I know, but that doesn't mean I have to like it." That invisible, electrified fence, the exclusion zone, had become a bizarre kind of tourist attraction, though no one was foolish enough to actually cross the line. Ships would cautiously approach the boundary, getting just close enough to feel the strange spatial distortions that marked the edge before hitting the reverse thrusters. Some captains held somber memorials for the Zithran crews they knew. Most just came to stare at the spot where 300 warships had simply ceased to be. Near one of the major entry points, humanity had constructed a memorial station. It was a small, solemn outpost, serving as both a warning and a tombstone. Engraved on it were the names of every crew member of the Cassandra, the science vessel that made one last desperate attempt to warn the Zitharan fleet. Beneath their names, a single powerful line was etched. They volunteered to be the final warning. They prayed you would listen. And below that, a longer message was displayed for all to read. This exclusion zone exists not because Earth seeks conflict, but because we seek peace. We ask only that other species honor our boundaries, as we honor theirs. The fleet that entered this space ignored numerous warnings. Their destruction was a tragedy, but it was one that could have been avoided. We hope no other species ever forces us to demonstrate our defensive resolve again. We would far rather be your partners than your adversaries. The choice, now as always, is yours. Below this plaque, a literal line was projected into space, a glowing marker indicating precisely where the exclusion net began. The unspoken message was impossible to miss. Cross this line uninvited, and you will share the fate of the Zitharan fleet. It was a simple, stark, and absolute warning. Vessels from every corner of known space would arrive, read the message, and then quietly turn around and head for home. This fundamental shift in the galaxy's perception of humans began to manifest in surprising ways. Trade agreements that had been deadlocked for years were suddenly being finalized. Everyone, it seemed, now wanted to collaborate on research initiatives or expand cultural exchange programs. No one ever said it out loud, but the calculation was simple. It was far more profitable to be a friend of Earth than to risk becoming its enemy. Human colonies located outside the protected zone began reporting a sharp decline in hostile encounters. Pirates who once saw human cargo ships as easy targets now gave them a very wide berth. Aggressive species that used to demand tribute from human settlements suddenly decided that such demands were no longer necessary. The few boneheads who chose to test that new reality simply vanished. Their ships were sometimes found months later, adrift and silent, with no crew and no signs of a struggle. Earth never claimed responsibility. It didn't need to. 6 months after the Zithran fleet was erased, an ambassador named Yulin published an academic paper titled "The Quiet Ones: An Analysis of Human Galactic Policy." It instantly became essential reading for diplomats across the galaxy. Its central thesis was straightforward. Humans do not make idle threats. They don't engage in posturing. They never bluff. When they draw a line in the stars, that line is real. And when they issue a warning, you had better listen. The report delved into the strange and terrifying pattern of human history. See, you could leave them be, and they'd be the quietest, most peaceful neighbors in the entire galaxy. But if you pushed them, If you truly backed them into a corner, they would invent something so reality-shattering that it changed the very rules of conflict. Things like nuclear fire, engineered plagues, thinking machines, and even weapons that could tear holes in space-time itself. Humans, the analyst Yulin had written, are not the galaxy's most aggressive species. They aren't the most warlike or even the most violent. But when it comes to sheer survival, they are, without question, the most terrifyingly creative. They walk into every single confrontation with the assumption they might lose, so they prepare for every nightmare scenario. This makes them infinitely more dangerous than any race that just relies on having bigger ships or more soldiers. The final conclusion of the paper sent a shiver down the spine of every military leader who read it. The galaxy is left with two choices. Option 1, we acknowledge Earth's borders as absolute, we respect their sovereignty, and we coexist peacefully with a species that, frankly, just wants to be left alone. Option 2, we can keep poking the bear and discover what other unspeakable horrors they've been dreaming up. The Zithran Empire chose option 2. Let their ghost be a warning to us all. At the Military Academy on Shvin Prime, a copy of Yulin's paper was now required reading for every cadet, packaged with a detailed breakdown of what happened to the Zitharan Armada. The takeaways were hammered home with brutal clarity. You will respect the borders of other species, you will take their warnings seriously, and you will never, ever make the mistake of thinking that superior numbers or technology guarantees you a victory. One combat simulation in particular became the new gold standard for every military across the stars. Cadets were dropped into a virtual command chair with a simple prompt. Your fleet is positioned before a defensive boundary erected by a local species. They have issued a final warning not to cross. Your high command has ordered you to breach their territory to seize strategic resources. What is your order? The only correct answer, as every cadet quickly learned, was to disobey the command and refuse to advance. You might survive a battle against enemy ships. You cannot survive a battle against the very fabric of space when it has been weaponized against you. More to the point, obeying an order that results in the complete annihilation of your fleet serves no one. They started calling it the Zitharan scenario. Back in human territory, the changes were just as profound, though far less visible to the rest of the galaxy. The 50 massive platforms that generated the exclusion net were under constant maintenance and upgrades. Their quantum hearts were periodically refreshed, and their software was endlessly refined. New defensive protocols were designed for threats that hadn't even been imagined yet. But the physical platforms themselves remained unchanged. They functioned perfectly, which meant the truly advanced projects were happening in the shadows. Ambassador Chen hadn't been bluffing when she told her colleagues that Earth had more tricks up its sleeve. What she failed to mention was the sheer scale of the program. Beyond the exclusion net, Earth had quietly launched 300 autonomous defense platforms into the void. They were hidden along major galactic trade routes, near heavily populated systems, and at strategic points to counter any threat to Earth or its colonies. Each platform was armed with the same reality-warping technology as the net, but these were designed for precision strikes, not for creating a massive dead zone. They had never been fired, not even once. Almost no one in the galaxy even knew they existed, which was exactly how Earth preferred it. The head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command had a favorite saying, "The best weapon is the one you never have to fire." The exclusion net did exactly what it was designed to do. It neutralized one existential threat and deterred 1,000 others simply by existing. That is the very definition of efficient defense. But in the private chambers of government, the debate raged on. The weight of 500,000 lives was a heavy burden on the conscience of many leaders. Some insisted there had to have been another way, a method to simply disable the fleet instead of utterly erasing it. The counter-argument was always the same. Anything short of total destruction would have been perceived as a simple setback. The Zitharans would have regrouped, rearmed, and kept pushing until they found a way through. The debates never led to a resolution. The exclusion net remained active. The border remained absolute, and the rest of the galaxy learned to live with it. 3 years after the Empire fell, A young Zitharan officer named Krenel was assigned to a patrol route along the border regions of what was once his people's territory. He commanded a small corvette, flying the flag of the new Zitharan Federation, part of a peacekeeping force trying to maintain stability in the fractured systems. One day, his patrol brought him near the shimmering edge of Earth's exclusion zone. He had been just a boy when High Commander Velkoth led his fleet to its doom, but the disaster had carved a hole in his family. An uncle, 2 cousins, and friends he'd grown up with had all eagerly enlisted to go teach the humans a lesson. None of them ever returned. Krenal ordered his ship to hold its position at what he hoped was a respectful distance from the zone's edge, close enough to get a clear view of the memorial station, but far enough not to trigger any alarms. His first officer, an old veteran who had served in the Imperial fleet, walked up beside him on the bridge. "Coming to pay your respects, sir?" "Something like that," Krenal murmured, his gaze locked on the memorial's image on the main viewer. "Did you lose anyone on those ships?" "Too many," the veteran said quietly. "Good soldiers, fierce warriors. They were following their orders, just like any of us would have." What do you do after the weakest species in the known galaxy shatters your entire empire in less than a day? You drift in the silent void, staring at the monument they built on top of your grave. That's what the young officer, Krenal, was doing. "They didn't deserve to die like that," he finally whispered. "No," the old soldier next to him agreed. "No, they did not." He turned to the veteran, whose gaze was fixed on the distant station. "But why? Why would the humans create something so absolute?" "I've asked myself that question 1,000 times, sir," the veteran said with a sigh. "I've read every report, every analysis of their history, and I think the answer is much simpler than we want to admit. They were afraid. Utterly terrified." "Of us?" Krenal asked, bewildered. "Of everyone," the old soldier clarified. "Look at it from their perspective. Earth is one planet, one species. We are thousands of species spread across millions of worlds with fleets large enough to blot out their star. To them, the entire universe was filled with potential predators," he went on. "They knew they could never win a war of attrition. They could never hope to match the industrial might of the great empires. So they built something that made fleets and armies completely irrelevant." Krenal nodded slowly as the horrifying logic began to sink in. They created a weapon so monstrous that no one would ever dare to attack them again. "It was more than just a weapon," the veteran corrected him gently. "It was a promise you couldn't afford to ignore. Commander Velkoth thought it was all a bluff. He couldn't conceive of a species that would actually build something like the exclusion net. But that's the thing you learn about humans. They don't make bluffs. They told us precisely what would happen if we crossed their line, and when we did, they kept their word." "So are we supposed to hate them for it?" Krenal asked, his voice barely audible. The veteran stood in silence for a long moment. "I don't know, sir. There's a part of me that does. They killed my friends. They broke our empire and changed our civilization forever. But another part of me knows that we were given every chance to turn back. We just didn't listen because our pride, our arrogance wouldn't let us." He lifted a clawed hand and pointed at the memorial station on the screen. "The humans built that station. Not as a trophy, but to honor their own dead. The crew of the starship Cassandra, the ship that made a final, desperate plea to save our fleet. That has to tell you something about them, doesn't it? They never wanted any of this to happen. They did everything they could to prevent it. We were the ones who forced them to act." Krenal couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. "If you had been in command that day, would you have done things differently?" "I'd like to think I would have," the veteran said, his voice thick with an old pain. "I'd like to believe I would have listened to their Captain Torres, ordered our ships to turn around and found another way. But I was raised in the old empire, sir. I was taught that retreat was the same as cowardice. If I had been sitting in Commander Velkoth's command chair, I fear I might have made the exact same catastrophic decision." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "That's the thought that truly haunts me. Not that our people died, but that I could have been the one who led them straight into that trap." Just then, a soft chime came from a console. Oft. The communications tech swiveled in her chair. "Sir, we're being hailed. It's a human ship, broadcasting from inside the exclusion zone." Krenal felt his heart start to hammer in his chest. On the main viewer, the image of the memorial was replaced by the face of a human woman in a sharp military uniform. She looked about his age. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim of the Earth Defense Force vessel Sentinel. You are currently holding station near the demarcation line of Earth's exclusion zone. Do you require any assistance?" Her voice was perfectly calm, professional, and held absolutely no trace of malice. Crenal took a breath to steady himself. "No issues here, Lieutenant. I am Officer Crenal of the Zatharan Federation corvette New Dawn. We're on a standard patrol." He paused for a beat, then decided to be honest. I had family on the ships that were lost 3 years ago. I just wanted to see the memorial with my own eyes." The professionalism on Lieutenant Kim's face softened instantly into genuine compassion. "I see. I'm truly sorry for your loss, Officer Crenal. Please, hold your position for as long as you need. The memorial is there for anyone who wishes to pay their respects." "Thank you," Crenal replied, then voiced the question that had been weighing on him since he arrived. "Lieutenant," I began, my voice low, "did you know anyone on the Cassandra?" Kim gave a small, heartbroken nod. "Captain Torres was my mentor at the academy. She taught me everything: navigation, first contact protocols. She knew it was a suicide mission when she volunteered. She had this idea, this hope, that if your people saw humans willing to sacrifice themselves just to send a final warning, it might actually convince Commander Velksaw to turn back." I stared at the cold, empty space outside the viewport. "But it didn't," I said, the words feeling like ice. "No," Kim whispered, the pain clear in her eyes. "It didn't. Captain Torres knew the odds were impossible, but she always said she had to try. That was just who she was." I considered that. "So your people remember her?" "Oh, absolutely," Kim confirmed. "There's a massive statue of her at Earth's main orbital station. Her final broadcast is required viewing for every new cadet. At the academy, they drill it into your head. The best soldiers are the ones who never have to fire a shot. They're supposed to be diplomats first, warriors last. They hold up Captain Torres as the ultimate example of that ideal." But as I stared at her statue and then at the memorial wall with 500,000 names carved into it, the math just didn't add up. If you've ever had that gut feeling that the official story is missing a few key chapters, hit that subscribe button, because you're about to learn the truth they tried to bury forever. I found my friend Lieutenant Kim tucked away in the ship's quiet archives. "Kim, can I ask you something, for real?" I asked, keeping my voice down. "Strictly off the record, do you honestly believe what happened back then was the right call?" Kim sighed, a sound so heavy it felt like it carried the weight of every single one of those lost souls. "That's a loaded question, Crenal," she said, her gaze fixed on a dusty data slate. "Look, it was a horrifying tragedy. You don't throw a parade for losing that many lives, but you've read the history files. You know what happens to young species who can't lock their own front door. They get stomped on, or worse. Earth decided to build a fortress instead of digging a grave." But here's what she didn't know. My great-grandmother was on one of those ships. And it wasn't a warship. It was a transport full of refugees. That was the first little surprise, the first crack in the official narrative. For weeks, I secretly sliced into the classified logs and found another shocker. The defense network had fired a full 30 minutes before the enemy fleet was even a threat. This wasn't a defense, it was an ambush. And then, hidden under layers of military-grade encryption, I found the big one. Captain Torres never gave the order. The command came from a civilian administrator, a man who is now one of the most powerful figures in our government. Those people weren't invaders. They were fleeing his brutal regime, and he used a phantom alien threat to erase them from existence and cement his own power. Torres was just the hero they needed to take the fall. We couldn't let him get away with it. Working together, Kim and I leaked the unredacted logs. The administrator was exposed, his entire legacy shattered. Captain Torres was finally honored for what she truly was, a patriot who had been betrayed. It was a quiet sort of revenge, a happy ending found in the corrected paragraphs of history books, and it proved the one moral that matters. The truth is always the thing most worth defending. "We made ourselves too dangerous to mess with," she said, choosing her words like a demolitions expert. "What happened to your fleet? That was the terrible, bloody price we paid to prove our deterrent wasn't a bluff. It was an awful cost, but it's prevented hundreds of other wars from even starting. How many conflicts never happened because other empires now think twice? How many trillions of lives have been saved because bullies finally realized that having a bigger stick doesn't guarantee you'll win?" I had to ask. "So the ends justified the means?" "I think the means were absolutely monstrous," she replied, without a flicker of hesitation. "And I wish with every fiber of my being that there had been another option. But I also believe that if we hadn't shown the galaxy that our defenses were deadly serious, someone else would have come knocking, and then another after them. The exclusion net has exactly one setting on. You can't negotiate with it. You can't reason with it. It just executes its programming. Your fleet had to learn that lesson in the most brutal way possible so that no one else ever would." The weight of her words settled in the quiet cockpit. "I appreciate your honesty, Lieutenant." "We believe in being honest," she replied, "especially with those who've paid for our security. Is there anything else?" "No, that's all, thank you." "We'll be departing shortly." Kim gave a crisp nod. "Safe travels, Officer Crenall, and once again, I am truly sorry for your loss." The screen winked out. Crenall sank back into his command chair, the conversation replaying in his head. "She seems decent," his first officer remarked quietly, "for someone from the species that shattered our empire." "She is," Crenall agreed, "and that's what's so unsettling. It would be so much simpler if they were just villains. But they aren't. They're just people, trying to make it in a galaxy that looked at them and saw a free lunch." He rose from his chair and faced his bridge crew. "Plot a new course, on to the next patrol point. Our work here is done." As the starship New Dawn turned and moved away from the boundary, Crenall took one last look at the floating memorial. The words etched on its plaque would hang in the void for eternity, a permanent reminder of the day the galaxy learned that a warning from humanity was not a suggestion. Stay away. Two simple words that had reshaped the universe. Across the vast expanse of the galaxy, countless others were having similar stunned conversations. Different species, different uniforms, but the same shocking new reality. Earth had drawn a line in the cosmic dust, enforced it with terrifying finality, and completely upended the ancient rules of galactic power. In the magnificent chambers of the Galactic Council, a new piece of legislation was being debated. It was proposed by a coalition of smaller species, the kind of worlds that were used to being kicked around. It called for universal laws governing sovereign territory. The concept was shockingly simple. Every intelligent species had the right to declare a defensive zone around their home system, and that zone was to be considered their inviolable space by everyone else. They were calling it the Earth Accord. Oddly enough, the human ambassador, a woman named Chen, had actually argued against using that name. "We really don't want to be the poster child for this kind of policy," she had insisted during a private session with the speaker. "Our goal is just to be one of many species who have the fundamental right to be left alone." "I understand that, Ambassador," the speaker replied gently, "but you must appreciate the symbolism. The Earth Accord represents a fundamental change. For thousands of years, the rule was, might makes right. The strong took whatever they wanted, and the weak either ran or they died. Your people proved there is another way. That advanced technology, combined with an unbreakable will, can be a shield against raw power. You've demonstrated to every small world that they can defend their homes if they are willing to pay the price." "That price was 500,000 people," Chen said, her voice barely a whisper. "Indeed. And because they paid that price, millions, perhaps billions more, may now live in peace. The predatory empires are questioning everything. They're discussing trade instead of planning invasions. They're attempting diplomacy instead of issuing threats. These are good things, Ambassador, even if they were born from a terrible, terrible tragedy." The Earth Accord passed by an overwhelming majority. Only 3 species voted against it. All of them were crumbling empires that had been built on the backs of conquered worlds. Their objections were officially noted and then completely ignored. Under the new laws, dozens of species immediately declared their own exclusion zones. None were as absolute as Earth's, of course. Most were just enforced by patrol ships and sensor arrays, but the principle was the same. Here is our line in the sand. You cross it at your own risk. War didn't disappear from the galaxy overnight. There were still fights over resources and disputed territories. But the fundamental nature of the game had been altered. Boundaries were now respected, warnings were now heeded, and the old deadly assumption that the bigger fleet always wins was finally and truly dead. Picture this. You're the new species in the galactic neighborhood. You draw a little circle around your home system and politely say, "Please, just leave us be." And what does the rest of the galaxy do? They laugh in your face. That's precisely what happened to Earth. 5 years after the most powerful fleet in the galaxy learned that lesson the hard way, our ambassador, a woman named Chen, stood before the council one last time. She reminded them of their ridicule, of how they dismissed humanity as young, naive, and completely out of our league for daring to claim our own tiny corner of space. The colossal Zithran Empire decided to call Earth's bluff, and the result completely rewrote the course of galactic history. Ambassador Chen let that fact hang in the air, her gaze sweeping across the faces of delegates who had once sneered at her. Over the years, she had watched their scorn curdle into fear and eventually blossom into a reluctant, undeniable respect. "I will not apologize for our actions," she stated, her voice as firm as steel. "My government did what was necessary to protect its people, and by that measure, we were successful." But then her expression softened just a bit. "We never wanted to be feared," she admitted. "All we ever truly wanted was to be left in peace. We just wanted the chance to grow at our own pace, to make our own mistakes, and to build our own future without older, stronger species looking at us like we were an unguarded dinner plate. That boundary we created, the exclusion net, it gave us that security. But it also branded us. We became the galaxy's boogeymen. Everyone whispers about us now. They wonder what other terrifying weapons we're hiding in our back pocket. They treat us with a cautious respect that's born entirely from fear, not from friendship." She shook her head, a clear sadness in her eyes. "This is not the relationship we wanted with the galaxy, but it is the one you forced upon us. When we asked politely for our own space, you turned a deaf ear. It was only after we demonstrated the catastrophic consequences of crossing our line that you finally decided to listen." And this, she explained, pointed to a deep, systemic problem with galactic culture, one she hoped was finally beginning to change. "The Earth Accord is a good first step," she conceded. "By formally recognizing every species' right to defend their own home, we're finally laying a foundation for genuine respect. But let me warn you, respect that's built on a foundation of fear is a house of cards," she added. "Real respect comes from understanding one another, from sharing our cultures, from seeing each other as equals, not as threats." A faint smile returned to her face. "My successor, Ambassador David Martinez, will be dedicated to building that future. He's younger than I am, less cynical. I truly hope the galaxy proves his optimism right." "It is my deepest hope," she said, her voice echoing in the silent chamber, "that future generations will remember the fate of the Zithran fleet not as a show of human power, but as the very last time anyone had to learn that some lines should never be crossed." The entire assembly rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation, an almost unheard of honor. Ambassador Chen gave a single small bow and walked away from that life for good. She retired to a peaceful life in the mountains back on Earth, where she wrote her memoirs. She never returned to space. She never laid eyes on the memorial station that now listed the names of every crew member who paid for their empire's pride, but she never forgot them. She often thought of their captain, who met her fate with quiet dignity, and the commander, whose arrogance doomed them all. She thought of all those lives, snuffed out in an instant, simply because a clear warning was dismissed as a bluff. In her memoirs, which were published 3 years after her retirement, she wrote, "People will debate forever whether we did the right thing. Some will call us monsters who went too far. Others will say we didn't go far enough. I believe they are both mistaken," she continued. "We did precisely what we said we would do. We drew a line in the sand. We warned everyone not to cross it, and when someone finally did, we held that line. That is not cruelty, it's consistency. And in a galaxy where might makes right has always been the rule, sometimes consistency is the strongest weapon of all. A decade after the incident, something astonishing occurred. The Zithran Federation, the very empire that had lost its entire armada, collaborated with other species to erect a second monument right beside Earth's memorial at the edge of our solar system. This new monument was colossal, etched with 500,000 names, every single soul who was on those ships. Beneath the staggering list, a simple message was carved. They were following orders. They believed in their nation. They ignored the warnings and paid the highest price. Let their sacrifice be a lesson that arrogance is never a substitute for wisdom. The inscription went on. Let their memory serve as a reminder that every choice has a consequence. Let their names be a warning to all who follow. When a boundary is drawn, you must listen. When someone says no, you must respect it. Your power does not grant you the right to ignore the rights of others. On the day of its dedication, ships from 30 different species gathered, not for a battle, but to bear witness. Not a single one dared to cross into the exclusion zone. They were simply there to observe and remember the lesson that had been learned. Ambassador Martinez was the one who led the human delegation. His voice was broadcast to every ship in attendance. We are not gathered here to celebrate a victory or to mourn a loss, he stated, but to commemorate a moment that forever changed our galaxy. The names you see on this monument belong to people who died because a boundary was violated, he said. Their deaths were preventable. Their sacrifice was a profound tragedy, but their legacy will be to ensure that no one ever has to learn this lesson in such a brutal way again. He paused, then said, Earth offers its most sincere condolences to the Zithran Federation and to every family who lost someone they loved. We look forward to a time when displays of force like this are no longer needed, he said. A time when respect is born from decency, not from fear. But until that day comes, the exclusion net will remain active. The border is not negotiable. The warning is absolute. He then gestured to the two massive monuments, floating side by side in the void. Let these two structures stand together, he declared. One human, one Zithran, one a memorial, the other a warning. A reminder of what happens when pride meets consequence, and a symbol of hope that one day we won't need such reminders at all. With those words, the ceremony concluded. The fleets of ships turned and left, leaving the two silent giants to guard the border where 300 warships had once ceased to be. Decades rolled by. The galaxy changed. Empires rose and empires fell, but the boundary around Earth's space never flickered. It was a constant. Galactic trade routes were permanently rerouted around it, and old starship captains would show it to rookie pilots as a grim fairy tale. You see that blank spot on the star charts? They would ask, pointing a finger at the empty space. That's human territory. You don't go there. The line is real. The warnings aren't just for show. And if you ever start thinking you're special enough to test them, just remember, the Zithran Empire thought the exact same thing. The event became mandatory reading at Earth's military academies, not as a victory to be celebrated, but as a sobering cautionary tale. Cadets studied how the exclusion net was engineered, how it was put in place, and how terrifyingly efficient it was. But they also studied the price, 500,000 lives, the collapse of an empire, and a permanent reputation as the species that weaponized the fabric of reality. The final exam always included the same essay prompt. Knowing all that you know, would you have given the order to activate the net? There was no correct answer. The purpose of the question was to teach them the unbearable weight of command, the razor-thin edge between possessing power and choosing to use it. Most cadets answered yes, arguing that the long decades of peace that followed were proof that the cost was worth it. A few answered no, insisting that there must have been a different path, a solution that wasn't so catastrophic. And a handful, who were perhaps the most insightful, would simply write, "I don't know," acknowledging that some choices are too monumental to be labeled as simply right or wrong. All three responses received full marks. 50 years after it happened, a young historian managed to get an interview with one of the last surviving engineers who helped design the exclusion net. "Do you ever have regrets?" the historian asked, "about building something so absolute?" The old engineer, now frail and thin, was quiet for a very long time. "Every single day," she whispered at last. "And also, not for a second, it's both, at the same time." The historian looked confused. "How can that be possible?" "Because," she clarified, "we understood that building the net would either save our species or cost us our soul. We succeeded at the first part." She went on, "We bought humanity security. We bought ourselves the time to grow without being seen as easy prey, but we paid a heavy price. We became the monsters in the galaxy's closet. We are feared, but we are not respected. And that fear has left us more isolated than we ever thought possible." "But you would do it again?" the historian asked. "Yes," she answered without a moment's hesitation, "because the only other option was to fight an endless series of wars until one day someone finally got through. We chose to make a single, horrifying example in order to prevent 1,000 smaller wars," she concluded. "The data says we made the correct call, but math doesn't feel the weight of 500,000 names." That interview became the centerpiece of a book that examined how that one single event had reshaped the entire galaxy. Its title was simple: The Warning. The book became a bestseller on hundreds of different worlds and was translated into thousands of languages. It was assigned reading for diplomats, generals, and scholars alike. Its central argument was that the day the Zithran Armada vanished wasn't just another battle. It was the day the entire galactic community was forced to grow up. It was the moment the galaxy learned that a truly brilliant defense could be more powerful than any offense. But the history books didn't dwell on the victory. The final chapter of the book was titled The Cost of Peace. It wasn't about military tactics, it was about the people. It told the story of the heroic crew of the scout ship Cassandra, who knew they were flying on a one-way trip to deliver that last warning. It remembered the Zithran soldiers who were just following orders, flying straight into nothingness. It told of the families on both sides who would never welcome their loved ones home, and the immense burden carried by every single human who designed, approved, and ultimately activated the exclusion net. In the end, the historian wrote, "The ultimate question is not whether Earth had the right to defend its home. The question is, what kind of galaxy do we want to live in? Do we want a galaxy where borders are honored out of fear, or one where they are honored because we all agree that every species has a right to exist peacefully?" Earth's actions gave us the first. Imagine you're facing an enemy fleet so massive it blocks out the stars, and they've made it clear they're here to wipe you out. That was humanity's reality, and they had one last desperate card to play. If you want to know how they turned the tables on an entire galaxy, you're going to want to hear this. Fast forward 100 years from that day, and that terrifying fleet is just gone. In its place is a perfect silent border that no one dares to cross. The whole galaxy is different now. Younger races get to grow up without being crushed by older bully empires. For the first time, borders actually mean something, and when someone puts up a warning sign, people listen. The old way of thinking, that the biggest army automatically wins, was completely shattered. Now, there's a new, chilling understanding that if you push any species far enough into a corner, they might just invent a defense so terrifying that trying to invade them would be pure suicide. The galaxy is far from perfect, of course. There's still fighting, and there are still rivalries. But the fundamental rules of the game have been changed forever. And you can trace that massive shift all the way back to one simple two-word message that still hangs at the edge of human space. Stay out. Those two words taught the galaxy a lesson it has never, ever forgotten. And back on Earth, tucked away in a quiet peace garden that almost no outsiders ever see, there's a monument that tells the whole story. It's covered in the names of every last person who helped build what they called the exclusion net. You'll see the names of the scientists who first dreamed up the impossible physics, the engineers who built it with trembling hands, and the leaders who made the soul-crushing decision to finally switch it on. Below all those thousands of names, there's one final sentence carved into the stone. We did what we believed was necessary for our survival. History will be our judge. We can only hope that one day, our children will live in a galaxy where such terrible weapons are no longer needed. Until then, we stand guard, we hold the line, and we remember what peace truly cost. Above that monument, the stars just keep shining, timeless and uncaring, watching countless ships crisscross the galaxy in safety. And every single one of those ships gives a wide, respectful berth to a small, quiet patch of space where 300 warships once flew in and were simply erased from existence. The warning is still there, the border is still absolute, and for the first time in its long, bloody history, the galaxy had finally learned how to listen.